Hello, everyone. My name is Rafal, and I would like to welcome everyone to my Hatchet Photography podcast. Today, I have a very special guest, Tom Trevatt. I hope I said that correctly. Um, Welcome to the podcast. We've been planning this for a little bit, and I'm super honored to have you on podcast. You are amazing photographer.
Thank you.
You are podcaster too. So it seems like we kind of feel all this discussions and conversations. So I'm truly honored to have you on this podcast, and I'm really looking forward to talk to you. We briefly chat before, and I'm sure this conversation is going to be extremely interesting.
Let's hope so.
Awesome. Okay, so let me start with the basic question. I always ask my guests because
Mhm.
everyone has their own story getting into photography.
Of course.
Some people have completely different careers, and all of a sudden they have this all moment where they're like, okay, I want to be a photographer, and they just like completely turn their lives upside down and they becoming photographer. Some people have some kind of background. I did a little bit of research on you, so I've been following your work. I try to find as much information as I could about your story, so I know a little bit. So I
Mhm.
know you've been in this creative world for quite some time. But tell me your story. How did you get into photography?
So, well, remember in 2020 there was a big thing that happened.
Yes.
So that kind of changed everything for me. So I
Mhm.
just finished my PhD. I've been in the art world and in academia for 20 something years.
Oh wow.
And in 2020, I'd finished my PhD. I had been teaching, but my teaching is always the beginning of the academic year.
Mhm.
So by March in 2020, I'd kind of wrapped up all my teaching that year. And while I was doing my PhD, I was DJing as a side hustle. And
Oh, wow.
it got to the point in 2020, obviously, we were just kind of prior to that first lockdown period. And I was like, what can I do? What can I do? Because I knew that basically everything in my life was kind of coming to an end. And I'd just been like, some DJ agency had kind of scouted me while I was doing some DJing one time and said, hey, can you join our agency? I was already part of an agency, but they were like, can you join the agency to do like, so weddings and events and stuff like that?
Mhm.
Not that I was particularly interested in this necessarily, but it was like, I was going to spend that last year, that 2020 year, as my last year DJing before I took academia even more seriously. And so I was like, yeah, sure, that's fine. I'm gonna work really, really hard. But in that moment, they said, do you have any photos and videos of yourself performing? I was like, I don't have any of these things.
Mhm.
So I realized when we started hitting these kind of first lockdown periods that, I wasn't going to be able to DJ. Teaching was kind of over for the year, and I'd just finished the PhD. What am I going to do?
Mhm.
Photography kind of, I was like, right, okay, people need photographs of themselves. And I know maybe sort of 50 something DJs who would need photographs of themselves.
Mhm.
And I'd done an art foundation in photography back in 1999, 2000.
Mhm.
And it had been in film. I worked in a dark room. It was pre-digital being kind of the predominant form of photography.
Mhm.
So I just was like, right, okay, I know how to take a photograph, and I can research how to do video. So I spent a sleepless night one night just kind of figuring this out, and came up in the morning with like, right, this is the strategy. This is what I'm going to do. And yeah, so 2020 to 2021, when obviously we couldn't have any clients in close to us, I was like, right, I'm going to go out and learn how to use my camera, and I'm going to do a lot of street photography. And there's a lot of protests happening at the time in London. So I was going on those protests,
Mhm.
like Black Lives Matter movement protests. I was like,
Yeah.
right, this is really interesting way of kind of experiencing the world through the lens, through photography. And I think I'd always taken photographs just on my phone, really, and I'd obviously had that kind of background in photography before, but it's never something that I really kind of took seriously as a form that I could do. I was
Mhm.
interested in it for an art perspective and from a theoretical perspective, but not something that I would be doing until it all changed, really. And then I was like, right, okay, what can I do that actually provides me with a kind of source of income to make a living?
Mhm.
And I just was like, well, people need photographs themselves. So photographs of people, portraiture, or more specifically headshots, is a way to make a living. And that's kind of what happened. I started, yeah, sort of building a portfolio of friends and so forth, and people in the local
Mhm.
community, and just sort of built this up. And yeah, and it was amazing because some of those people that are in that kind of, in that first portfolio, they were friends with other people. They worked
Mhm.
in certain industries, and their friends saw them. And yeah, and I kind of, for a couple of months, I joined the headshot crew, Peter Hurley's headshot
Mhm.
crew. And
I think we all go through it.
I think everyone in the headshot world goes through this kind of trial by fire process, and yeah, just kind of spent a little bit of time getting into that and building my portfolio. And then in May 2021, I launched the business and kind of put some
Mhm.
adverts out there, and obviously had a few friends who were like pushing me to their colleagues and so forth,
Mhm.
and started from the second bedroom in my flat, which was
Mhm.
great. Just working at home and having people come to the flat, which was
Mhm.
kind of hilarious. Very domestic. And then yeah, just at some point in the latter part of that year, I saw an advert on, like, someone put an advert for a studio on Facebook, on a Facebook group, saying, "Oh, I'm looking to join with another photographer to get into this studio. Does anyone want to join?" And I went along with them and saw this space, and it was a great space in this place in
Mhm.
London, in Bermondsey. And yeah, and then kind of the rest is history, really. I moved into that studio and worked in that studio for probably 6 7 months, and then realized quite quickly that if I was going to kind of do more than a kind of share of shoots per month, there's three of us in the studio, I really couldn't do more than 10 shoots per month. And I knew that I wanted to, because I'd get a certain number of bookings per month, but then at the same time, I was like, right, I want to do test shoots. I want to do loads of test shoots and
Mhm.
make sure I'm working, quite regularly doing the photography and building up that portfolio and that skill set. So I knew that I wanted to do more than 10 per month. So I just made the choice to, sort of step the game up and have my own studio.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's been great. I mean, I've had multiple studios since then, and where I am
Okay.
now is again another studio. So at some point, I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, that's the kind of
Mhm.
origin story. And yeah,
Interesting.
it's been an exciting ride. Yeah, you're right. I've been in the kind of creative world for a long time. I've been a
Mhm.
curator, and I've made exhibitions for many years.
Mhm.
Back in sort of mid 2000s, I was ran a gallery in Brighton, and then moved to London and ran galleries here, and have had a whole different life prior to this that is in
Mhm.
the creative world. And and I always think that I've had a very creative upbringing. My mum was in the kind of sort of design and art world to some degree, and
Oh,
there was
interesting.
loads of sort of furniture and architecture and painting and stuff that was always being kind of, it was in the world in a sense. So
Interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of, you have this kind of strong foundation, right? Like, you can build up kind of artistic kind of career for yourself. But let's talk a little bit more about portraiture and headshots.
Mhm,
And what drawn you into kind of this genre of photography? Because that's always fascinates me, because I think portraiture and headshots, especially, it's something that you have to have or learn, kind of have build this connection with people, right? It's not
mhm,
just someone shows up and then you just click and then you have the portraiture. Like, you need
mhm.
to learn how to connect with these people right on the
Yeah.
spot. Tell me a little bit about that experience getting to that point, because I know we all go through that process as a photographers, like, okay, I want to be a headshot or portrait photographer.
Hmm.
But then this kind of, you have to level up, right? You have to build those skills. Tell me about that part, because that always interests me, how, because everyone has a different approach to
Hmm.
connecting with people,
Hmm.
and getting them to the spot where you can photograph them and they can open up to you, and then you can just kind of capture this very, very unique moment between you and your subject, and then you can see that on those images. And I can see, going through your work, you connecting with these people, because that's where you can see true photography, right? And being in that industry for quite some times, I think that you can really recognize those photographers who really deeply connect with their subjects, and they can really capture them the right moment. So tell me about that journey when you started, and how you've built up those skills up to the moment where you can really feel that, okay, I can connect like literally with anyone these days.
Yeah. Well, firstly, thank you very much for saying that. That's very much the sort of core of the approach that I take. Um, I mean, in all honesty, I started doing headshot photography, portrait photography, because I knew that there would be a market there.
Hmm.
It was the starting point was how can I use this tool, the camera, to do something that I can kind of sell to people immediately, you know, and it's not that I'm very much not, you know, I very much haven't come from a business background. I very much haven't come from that kind of perspective of
Hmm.
like, this is, you know, I need to make a load of money and I need, you know, this is my perspective. But I recognized in 2020 that academia was just on its knees. There was no real way that I could build a productive and financially secure academic career.
Oh, well, okay.
And obviously, you know, I was getting past the age of 40, so staying up late and doing DJing just was never going to be the thing that I wanted to do. And so in a sense, it was a necessity. It was a necessity
Hmm.
to find another thing that I could actually throw myself into and that would be an enjoyable way to build a career and make a living. Um, and I fell in love with it. And
Hmm.
it was an accident to some degree. Obviously I'd had a background in photography and then obviously art, but portraiture wasn't necessarily something I was like, right, this is my like, I have to shoot in this, I have to do this, this is what I
Hmm.
love, blah blah blah. There could have been other things, but I think that I was taking things that I knew that I could do, which is
Hmm.
point a camera at something, combining it with something that I was learning, which was light, and adding in the part of me that is, I guess, the thing that I've kind of, you know, developed myself, which is the ability to talk to people and the ability to kind of
Hmm.
get people to open up and so forth. And you know, I've got an academic career. I teach, I still teach, and you know, part of that is that you do have to kind of hold people's attention and
Hmm.
say things to people and read them and understand them and engage with them at where they are, their level, and also bring something interesting to the table. So my sessions are like, you know, 4 hours, 5 hours long,
Hmm.
and we talk about all sorts of things. You know, sometimes it's therapy, sometimes it's therapy for me, you
Yeah.
know. And like actually speaking to people is an incredible experience. Like I get, you know,
Hmm.
I get to speak to like 10 or 12 different people per month who I've never would have never met and get to have all these
Hmm.
like amazing conversations and just, you know, that's fantastic. And they're not, you know, they're actors, they're designers, they're therapists, they're writers, they're small business owners. So every single conversation is different. Everybody
Hmm.
who comes to me, I'm just getting all this kind of like amazing life stories and like where they are in their career. And more often than not, people are coming to me as they probably are to you and other photographers at a particular moment in their career.
Hmm.
They're either at that kind of like,
100%.
right, I'm just about to go out on my own. Let's say I've been working in the corporate world for the last 12 years and now I'm going to, you know, start my own business. Or let's say I've just graduated drama school and I want some headshots for my, you know, for to put on Spotlight to grow the business there. And to your non-UK based listeners, Spotlight is an online platform to display
Hmm.
headshots and CVs of actors and stuff. Um, so yeah, it's just kind of like a combination of all those things. And you're very right that connection for me is the most fundamental
Hmm.
part of what I do. You know, I've we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but like I've kind of gone through this process of trying to do photography things, like
Hmm.
trying to take photographs and point lights at people's faces and blah 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 blah. To this point where I've just sort of stripped it back quite a lot now, where I'm like, right, what I really want to do is make sure that they're lit well, make sure that there's an interest, there's a kind of a subject matter there, that there's a kind of, you know, that the light is participating in that process of creating that subject, creating that story. But the thing that's really important is the connection. And if the light is getting in the way of that connection by making it, you know, too much this or too much that or something along those lines, I'm not particularly interested anymore. I look back at some of my old work and think, oh, there's a little bit too much kind of like playful light and
Hmm.
just can be fun and like, you know, I could try it out and like, you know, I always do like have little experiments with light and stuff. But for me, it's like if that's getting in the way of the thing that I'm there to do, which is create a photograph that helps them build the connection with the people that are going to see the photograph, then I'm kind of not doing them the best work that I possibly can. So
Mhm.
yeah, connection is number one for sure.
Absolutely. So I'm sure we both agree that headshot or portrait session is like a therapy for both of sides of the
Yes.
story. But also, I think it's kind of experience too, right? And I kind of like that was one of my, I don't know, after a few years shooting headshots, I've realized, this is experience which brings something valuable to both sides. And
Hmm.
then, like exactly what we talk about, the creating the connection and all this stuff. And I think COVID exposed that really
Hmm.
well, like how much we need connection with other people.
Hmm.
Like, we've been like, I felt sometimes like we're completely cut off from air by not being able to see people, to talk to them, to kind of have conversations face to face. And I think photographers, especially portrait and headshot photographers, really felt that, like, how
Hmm.
disturbing that is.
Hmm.
um so tell me a little bit more about, like, I want to kind of go deeper into this topic, because I think you brought some interesting points. And let's talk about that experience,
Hmm.
working with your clients. And as you said, I agree, everyone is different, everyone brings something different to the table. You have to also approach them differently, based on like you quick assumption, not maybe not assumptions, but some kind of, you have to just figure out who they are really quickly
Hmm.
and kind of create that specific atmosphere. Tell me your approach to your sessions, like what it's the process getting people, not like, I'm not talking from the business or marketing perspective,
Hmm.
because we talk about it, we'll talk about it a little bit later.
Of course.
But I want to talk a little bit about the client shows up, you never seen that person, or maybe you have some kind of conversations prior, but they're coming to the studio and you have to kind of get with them on the same level.
Hmm.
What's the process, how you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm honest, it does start with the marketing, and we will talk
Mhm.
about that. But
Yes.
it starts from the perspective of them seeing what I do, and
Mhm.
what I, what I'm really I'm not interested in working with just anybody, right? I'm not, and certainly I'm not priced in a way that means that I can work with just anybody. My approach really is that the people who come to me have specifically chosen to work with me because of the work, because of the
Mhm.
approach, because of the things I write about myself. And I've got quite a lot of words on the website, and I talk a lot about the process on the website. And there's a couple of videos so that people kind of have, if they're diligent and they're looking through, and I'm not just like some guy with a camera,
Mhm.
then they've actually come and they've chosen me specifically. And that is for me that's the first thing, right? They have to have kind of made that very conscious decision, because then at least they can kind of come to the studio prepared, and they trust the process. And there's a lot of
Mhm.
trust that goes into it, because
Yes,
they've
100%.
never had this before, they've never done this before, and they're coming to the studio and be like, "Oh, this is interesting, this is weird, this is scary sometimes." A lot of people are nervous about getting their photographs taken, especially because they're investing a lot of money into it, they're investing their time into it, it's something that they really care about because it helps them in their career and so forth. So there's a really important kind of aspect to this, which is the trust part of it. So if they don't come trusting the process, then I've kind of lost them before they even
Mhm.
do. And I've had one experience where that's the case. Maybe we can touch on that later.
Yes.
But most people, they're prepared. So it starts with that kind of first initial experience, that first impression of me. Then they email and they speak to my studio manager, and my studio manager sets up the shoot and so forth. And then they come to me. Some people like to have a phone call or a video call before the
Mhm.
shoot, but I don't tend to do that. And for me, it's like I want the session to be where I learn about the people, because I don't know about you, but like, as the advancing years, I don't know if it's the advancing years or it's just my brain doesn't work in quite the way. If I have a call like a month before the shoot, by the time we get to the shoot, I'm like, was it you that was like, were you the one that was doing this and wanted to do? And I've
Mhm.
forgotten by the time, I've forgotten all the details by the time. And I make notes and stuff, but it's like, you know,
Mhm.
if they're coming to the studio and we're going to go through that conversation anyway, we do it in the studio, because I don't want to be like, oh shit, what was it that we were talking about? So we'll sit down and we'll speak for 40 minutes.
Hmm.
we'll have a good conversation, and I'll get to know them. I'll get to know what stage they are in their life, what they want the photographs for, how they want to feel in the photographs, how they want people to think about them as they see the photographs, and just natter sometimes, just have a good old chat. It's really interesting, actually. I had a client a few weeks ago whose boyfriend came, and he was kind of sat in the background as me and the client were having this chat, and we were just just having a good old chat, and he was like clearly like, why are they talking so much, get on with it. He went and got a coffee and was like, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, at the end he said, when you were first chatting at the beginning, I was really confused. I was kind of a bit frustrated that you were just chatting. It was almost like you were wasting time. You were kind of like
Hmm.
going through this process and wasting time. In my business, we spend 3 minutes,
Yeah.
how are you doing? And then boom, straight into the meeting, and we get up, get stuff done. But now I've realized why you do it. And he'd
Hmm.
kind of seen the whole experience. And he said, I realize why you do it is because you have to get to know that person, to know what their wants and their needs and their desires are. Because otherwise, you're just kind of going in blind.
Yeah.
And like, I almost can't believe that people do short photo shoots. Like, I mean, I
This
don't
is
know.
something what I never could understand. And then, like I have a lot of admiration for those like, high volume headshot sessions where
Right.
they shooting for like hundreds or even thousand people a
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Like I don't like, well, I think it's a different environment and then it's like a different
Hmm.
goal with this. But if someone wants to have something very, very specific and something that really
Yeah.
reflect them, I don't believe you can do it in 5 minutes. I just have a
No.
hard time to believe it.
No.
Yeah. But
I
sorry
can
for
take a
interrupting.
photograph in 5 minutes. I can take the best photograph
That's
you've ever
correct.
seen
Yeah.
in 5 minutes, but I can't get the photograph that you need in 5 minutes.
Yes.
And I think that like all of the chat, all of the other stuff is so integral to it. And we will talk all the way through the shoot. I will buy lunch and we will sit there and we will, if someone's booked a shoot that starts at 11 and finishes at 4, we'd have had lunch halfway through. They'd have gone through multiple changes. We would just be like, I'd know them like a friend by the end of the shoot.
Yeah.
And actually, quite a few people who've been in my studio are now friends, and they come to my birthday parties and stuff like
Wow.
that. So I do. And by the way, if anyone of my clients is listening and they haven't been invited to a birthday party, I'm very sorry. You're more than
Yeah.
welcome.
You will come to the next one.
They'll come to the next one in September. Yeah, exactly. Next year. So it's talking, it's having the kind of that conversation that doesn't feel like it should be necessary to do. And I think that I see other photographers and they're doing this kind of like 2 hour, 1 hour shoot or whatever. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I've tried to do 1 hour, 2 hour shoots. And I sometimes do because like I do a top up session with people if they've come for a shoot already and I know them already and they come back, they want 3 photographs and it's easy peasy just to get a couple of photographs in an hour.
Mhm.
And I can take 300 photographs in an hour. It's not the point. But other like if you're new and I've tried to do a short session and I'm just like I'm racing through this, I'm
Mhm.
rushing and trying to get all this stuff done, I'm just like it's not getting the best out of me if we're trying to rush it, and it's not getting the best out of them. So yeah, it has to be that long session. Plus I'm just like I'm it's all manual focus, it's all like vintage or old lenses. We're not kind of I shoot on a GFX, which is not the fastest camera in the world,
Mhm.
and you know can't imagine I'd
So
get it right if I
seems like
just did that.
yeah. So seems like you took this to completely different level. And then what I mean by that is, and this is what is really fascinates me. What you're talking about it, because you're not just taking pictures of these people. You're creating like much deeper connection with each person,
Mm,
where you not only photograph them, but you want to like you like literally becoming their friends throughout
mm,
this photo shoot for that experience. That's really amazing because I think a lot of people forget about it, right? Like and then depends how you look at it. From business perspective, of course you want to have more clients, you want to kind of run through more people to make more, but at the end of the day it's the experience for not only you but also for the client. So
yeah,
tell me, kind of this is what my kind of next question comes to my mind is about your style of creating those images. And what I
mm,
mean by that, because sometimes people coming to us with specific needs, right? Like they kind of know what they want. I would say most people have no idea what they want. They trust what we do, and they
Yeah.
base on our previous work. Like, okay, I've seen your work, I like it, I want to have something similar.
Hmm.
But we always try to kind of put something special for each person.
Hmm.
So tell me, like, first of all, I want to know about developing your style, because you have very unique style of your photographs, and I know people are drawn to it. But tell me about how you develop that, and
Hmm.
how you work with clients who coming to you, and like, I'm trying to, like, my question is like, how you finding the balance between what they want, and also you want to implement your own artwork into this, and there's, you
Hmm.
always have to find this balance so the client is happy and also it's reflecting your work. Let's talk about it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I mean, to be perfectly honest, the first 2 years of my photography career, I was just like feeding on other
Mhm.
photographers' work. Like I spent, hours pouring through other portrait photographers' work and like, right, I'll try and emulate that little bit of light and I'll try and bring in that sort of stylistic element and or maybe that combination of colors and the backdrop elements and stuff like that. So I'm just sitting here and my laptop is propped up on a couple of books, one of which is Nadav Kander's
Mhm.
book, The Meeting. So, I'm like, brilliant. Nadav Kander is an outstanding photographer, and there was elements of his work that I was like, oh, I'll try and bring in that, and a little bit of like, sort of Phil Sharp's work or something like this, just a little bit of elements here and there, and like I was starting to do that, and I started to kind of get to this point where it's like, right, I'm picking apart that, and I'm pulling this over from here, and then it's almost like you have to clear it all out of the way,
Mhm.
where it's like you've done all of that kind of research, all of that learning, and now it's you. So
Mhm.
you've got all of those things. And like I've been in academia for a long time. I teach, right? So
Mhm.
I know the way that people like I've taught students who are like, writing their dissertation, writing their master's thesis or whatever. And it's like, right, okay, how are you kind of getting your voice in there? Because
Mhm.
I can see this person's voice, I can see this style of writing. Let's talk about your voice. And it was about a moment of finding your voice. And I think that everyone goes through this. They're like, right, I love that photographer's work. So I'm going to bring in that element there, going to bring in that element there. And it's just natural. It's just kind of what you naturally do.
Mhm.
And it's maybe around about 2 years, 3 years ago, 2.5 years, three years ago, that I was like, right, okay, let's really kind of, experiment with my voice. And it would, I mean, not that I wasn't, but it was like, right, let's really hone in on this. And yeah, I just like kind of becoming a little bit more simple with my work in a sense, and just
Mhm.
kind of stripping the stuff back and maybe not adding in too many elements. And I think the studio plays a lot of part in that because, like the various studios that I've been in, the studio is kind of the way that the studio feels, the the studio that I'm in at the moment is this cute little kind of mews, this cobbled mews in central London that you would have
No,
no
nice.
idea that you were there. It's on a street called it's on a little it's called the Iliffe Yard, and it's on these really cute little street. And it's all along the street is these workshops with like lovely red doors, wooden
Oh,
red
wow.
doors, and all of the workshops are all these kind of like turn of the century kind of old workshops that have got each of them now. They've all got kind of creative people. And there's a painter, there's designers, there's ceramicists, there's a florist, and just the first moment you walk into this street, you kind of feel this kind of creative energy.
Oh, wow.
And then my studio feels like an artist studio, right? And so it's meant to feel like an artist studio. It's not
Mhm.
meant to be like a kind of corporate space or a domestic space. It's meant to feel a little bit rough around the edges because it's got a rough concrete floor and it's a bit, it's a little bit artist studio, and there's a drafty
Mhm.
draft coming in, and I pull these doors back that are kind of doors, and it's like a that kind of adds to the style because people feel like they're kind of in an artist's studio with that kind of that
Mhm.
that sort of part of it. And that for me is like very much I take a lot of inspiration from the kind of paintings that my mum used to show me when I was a kid,
Oh, wow.
and like my mum loves the Dutch masters, and so I would be
Mhm.
looking at all these kinds of beautiful, like sort of high contrast paintings.
Mhm.
And like I love the kind of concept of the Baroque and
Mhm.
the sort of the sort of contrast and the light and shade and stuff like that. So all of
Mhm.
those sorts of things started to play into it. And I'm certainly not scared of shadows. I mean, you can tell that from my work. I'm not scared of shadows. um and in a way, I'm like, I don't want to kind of like my approach really isn't to take a photograph of somebody, it's to take a photograph about somebody.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone who does portraiture kind of says that phrase or knows that kind of way of thinking about it. But I'm like, I'm not particularly interested in just being like, right, here's your face, because like if you're an actor, let's say, and you are trying to compete with like 300 other actors on this kind of
Yeah.
spreadsheet of actors' faces, and the photographs all kind of are like, here's a person's face. I'm
Yeah.
like, it doesn't really do very much. Like, I want someone to be looking through those photographs and like, oh, I want to know more about that person. So they'll get a
Mm.
little bit interested in that person. And you kind of do that through the photography because you kind of invite these kinds of questions, right? Like you, it's not just about like, here's a photograph of this thing. It's like, right, okay, what's the story here? And you try and
Mm.
get people to kind of engage through having unanswered questions in the photographs, maybe. So something that's hidden, something that's veiled, something that's kind of feeling a little bit like it's not the full story. So they're like, they're coming in, they're participating in the
Mm-hmm.
construction of the meaning of the photograph, essentially. So the person who's viewing it is participating in that process. And that, I think, is the method by which you get
Mm-hmm.
more people interested in the work. And like the best headshots are the ones that get you work, right? Like
Yeah.
it's all very well being like a nice photograph of you, flattering image, nice angles and stuff like that. But if it's not really getting you the job or getting you into the room to get the audition and stuff, or whatever it is, then it's not really doing its job.
Exactly. Yeah. So let me ask you this, because that's, I think, like a following up question
Yeah.
is when it comes to choosing the final shots for for your clients, because I know, like, I just want to know about the process, because we see images differently, the
Hmm.
clients see, they see images differently, they judge them differently, they sometimes have insecurities, and the stuff what we
Yeah.
don't pay attention to, they of
Hmm.
course, like, see them
Yeah.
clearly. Also, because, like, I just want to know about the process,
Hmm.
how you pick the final shots for your clients.
Hmm.
Do you work with your clients? You giving them suggestions? You telling them your perspective, which are the strongest one, and which, in your opinion, they will work best for them? Or you just giving this whole process straight to your clients and they choosing their final shots? Tell me about that process, because that's always fascinates me, because every photographer has a different approach.
Hmm.
But at the end of the day, as you said, like, the image has to work, especially if you're shooting for actors, or you're shooting for people who using these images for specific kind of
Hmm.
reason.
Yeah.
You want the best, and then also, like, I have exactly the same approach. Good headshots or good portraits always brings you more clients, because that's what's working in your favor as well.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you develop this process of getting to the clients the final shots.
So, people call this multiple different things. I think in some worlds it's called in-person sales, but
Hmm.
uh, for me, it's in an ideal world, what I'd do is I'd sit down at the end of the photo shoot with my clients and we'd go through the photographs on my
Okay.
computer. And we'd create a short list. The short list would get shorter and shorter and shorter, and we'd get to
Hmm.
that final selection, and then they'd purchase those images. That's an ideal world because I think that, like you said, we look at photographs differently. And oftentimes, what I've noticed is when clients are asked to select their photographs themselves,
Yeah.
they focus more on the flattering image.
Hmm. Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, let's just say someone's got a perceived flaw. Let's just say, for argument's sake, they've got what they think of as a wonky ear.
Hmm.
And they will look at those photographs, and every photograph where they can see the wonky ear, they won't like. So they'll choose all the photographs on the other side where they don't have the wonky ear. I'm just as bad. You look at the way that I'm sitting, I know that this is the better side of my face, so I will always present this side of my face to people.
Yeah.
So we're all part of that process, but we all kind of have what we think of as perceived flaws. So to be able to have an objective perspective on this, that's from my perspective, that is more about the photography and what the photography does, helps them see beyond those flaws. Now, I can't strong arm anybody into buying photographs. I'm not going to demand that they take these photographs home with them over those photographs,
Yeah.
but I can strongly suggest something. Some people are very much like, right, it's you decide, it's totally your choice. You be the one that makes those decisions, and then I'll kind of maybe come along and just add a couple in here or take a
Mhm.
couple away there. That's fine. Sometimes people are like, no, I want to sit down with a cup of tea and really look at this and just like do this in my own space. And of course, like, I'm not going to tell them they can't do that. So I
Hmm.
will send them a viewing gallery, and then maybe I'll make a short list of that viewing gallery and say, these like 20 to 50 photographs are like my favorites. So that's what you've got my suggestions there. But I really like people to come to me and think about this as a kind of exercise in overcoming those kinds of insecurities. It's not
Hmm.
easy. It's really not easy to do that. But you know, when I try and tell people that their ego isn't going to get them work, right? So
Hmm.
if you are in this world trying to become an actor and you are really focused on only the photographs that are really, really beautiful of you, and that, of course, we can take some beautiful photographs of you, very flattering photographs. It might not be so helpful for you in a kind of business perspective.
Hmm.
So if you want photographs that are going to get you work in a acting world, there has to be interest in those photographs. There has to be a story in those photographs. And quite often that might mean not the most flattering image. That might be the one where you've got your face scrunched up, or like you're pulling an odd face, because that's the one that gets people to kind of like stop and go, oh, I want to know more about that person. So that is, I'm thinking back to a photograph of mine that I saw I took about 2 years ago now, of this actor who's maybe in his 50s. He's got stubble, good looking guy in his 50s, but he's got his hand here like this, and he's kind of just like this.
Hmm.
And it's like, that's not a flattering image, but it's an
Hmm.
interesting one. And it's, for anybody who's just listening, I just kind of grabbed the side of my face and made a kind of funny face. Like he's not it's not like kind of like most aesthetically like beautiful image of him, but it's a image of itself is aesthetically interesting. And I think that we have to kind of bring our aesthetic sensibilities to this. We have to bring our taste to this. We have to be discerning in a sense. That's part of the process. And if I take 800 photographs of somebody in a shoot and I send them a gallery of 800 photographs of their face, they're going to get very, very tired of their face very, very quickly. So
Hmm.
if I can kind of take that a lot of that work off their plate,
Hmm.
then
Yeah.
then I'm doing my job. If you're just like smashing, I know that there are some great headshot photographers in the world, and then they just send the galleries with the 800,000, 1,500 photographs. Is that the best service that you're giving to your client? Maybe not, because your client relies on you to have discernment and taste, and that, I think, is big
Yeah.
part of
They
what we're
definitely
doing.
looking for the guidance, right? Like, what that I agree with you 100% that, like, just throwing at them all those images, it's not making this job easier for any of
No,
us, right? Because they're
no.
getting frustrated. Of course, they're choosing whatever kind of comes first. And then after seeing, I don't know, 50, 100 images,
Hmm.
they like completely lost what they even want and what they
Yeah,
like, right?
yeah. And it's not good business either.
No, no,
if
no, no,
if
no.
if I send a gallery, and I've done it. Of course I do it. Of course, at the end of a shoot, we've done a shoot for 4 hours, and they're exhausted, and they're like, "Do you know what? I've got to get home. Kids are coming home from school, or like, partner's got the dinner in the oven. I'm going to get home. I want to do this another time. Totally fine. We're going to do that. Of course we are. But if I just bash out and send these like 1,000 photographs to people, they're not going to get back to me within 2 months. Like, the amount of time that I have to like chase people and be like, hey guys, did you want to select your photographs? And it's like, then I'm chasing people, and that's extra work for me. It's
Mm,
extra hassle for them. And it's not a good business move.
yeah, no, 100%. So tell me, okay, so let's kind of summarize. So basically, you helping your clients choose the photos,
Hmm.
you giving them some kind of direction, what works, what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
lastly, the clients making the final call on which shots.
Yeah. Broadly speaking, yeah. I mean, I certainly don't demand they take home
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
But very just between you and me and the 7 people listening, or
Hmm.
whoever's going to listen. Um, I, if someone comes to me and they've chosen, let's say let's say they get a lot of photographs, let's say they get 15, 20 photographs,
Hmm.
and they haven't chosen one of my favorites, I'll just give them that one for free.
Yeah.
because I'm
I do
like,
that the
I want
same.
that. Yeah, of course. I think we probably all do that. If they've just chosen a couple, then whatever. But
Yeah. But
if they've
also
chosen,
what I've learned over the years too, that people need to sometimes, like, how can I explain this, digest those images, because the first look, they have these feelings, but then with the time they start kind of growing into those images. That's
yeah,
what I found. And I have clients who, like, come in for the shoot and they use that images for decades sometimes, right? I'm like,
hmm
dude, like, it's time. It's been 5 years.
yeah,
You
yeah,
need
of
to
course,
upgrade. But
yeah,
they, like, I like this shot so much, I don't want to
yeah,
kind of get new one. And I don't know, like, the scary part, and getting older is probably one of the factors. But they,
yeah.
when they get used to that shot and they use it everywhere, it's just becoming their identity, right?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
It's kind of interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a photograph that I've just done a big redesign of my website, and there's a photograph that's on the actors page of my portfolio, and it's the first photograph that comes up, and it's this guy. He's kind of got his hand on his face like this,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't choose that when we went through the selections. We pared it down to a short list. Yeah, have a look. Go to the actors page, and he didn't choose that, and I think he didn't choose that because he spoke to his agent,
Oh
and
wow. Okay.
his agent probably said no. All the headshots in inverted commas need to be looking at the camera. They need to be seeing your face, and I think that's bullshit because I think that a headshot or a portrait of somebody does much more than just see someone's face. And he's got his eyes closed, and it's just the profile of his face, and he's got his hand on his face. And I think that's a strong image, and that's why I've put it at the front page of the. There we go. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, I know that his agent didn't choose it because I know what the agent is saying in the background. The agent is saying this is what a headshot is, and it must be
Mm,
X, Y, and Z. And
yeah.
I think that that's doing a disservice to their client. Just for people watching, this is a little bit darker than it appears on the
Yeah.
screen. I'm sure it's yeah, a little bit brighter in real
Yeah. Yeah.
life. Um, but what I like, I gave that to him because I knew that I wanted to put that in my portfolio, and of course I was going to edit it, so I was going to give it to him anyway. But it's like, for me, this photograph, it doesn't need to do the job of the kind of the front page headshot, like that kind of classic
Mhm.
close-up headshot. That classic close-up headshot, I totally agree. If you're going to put a photograph up on your kind of portfolio of your very first photograph, the headline headshot as it were, this isn't the one. This isn't the one. It's
Mhm.
obviously not the one, but this is a powerful image that tells me something about this guy that makes me want to know more. So this could be in the 7 or 8 other photographs that he puts on his Spotlight portfolio. He
Mhm.
should put a different photograph on the front page one. Totally agree. But I think when you ask opinions of agents, they have got a very, very like limited, and let's just say small c, conservative view
Mhm.
of headshots. Now that's not all agents, and some agents that I've spoken to and worked with and engaged with over the years have been absolutely open to slightly more artistic experimental stuff. But
Mhm.
in this instance, he didn't choose it. I gave it to him because I thought that he had to have
Mhm.
it, and I think it's probably the best image from the shoot. Now,
Yeah.
that's maybe a sort of I'm getting a little bit too like oh, it's a beautiful image, but it's literally just like he was sat there. It was almost between takes. It was like he just did this thing, just did that, and I was like, "Fuck, hold that." I was like, right, right, get 3 photographs, and then we just moved on. We just got 3 photographs of that particular pose, and then I moved on to the
Mhm.
next thing, and it was just like, nope, this is really, really good. So, yeah, it's not always, and like the agent's view of it, their view of it, my view of it, it's all just an opinion.
Mhm.
But take those opinions with pinches of salt. I would say,
Yeah.
and choose stuff that like breaks the mold a little bit. Choose stuff that kind of is a bit more interesting. It's a
Yeah.
little bit more kind of out there, because at the end of the day, you're in competition, right? It's like
Yeah.
especially as an actor, choose something that's a little bit, be a little bit more adventurous with your choices. And I
Mhm.
think that's kind of what something like this looks like. So yeah.
Yeah. But I think also it's like, and I completely understand what you're saying from photography perspective. We
Mm-hmm.
like those images which are different, which
Mm-hmm.
tells the story, which are risky. But I
Yeah.
think a lot of people, they don't want to take that risk, right? And they want to
Mm-hmm.
play safe, right? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes doesn't serve them. well,
Hmm.
right? If they
Hmm.
don't take those risks, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, but that's stunning image. Like, yeah, I went through your website, and yeah, this is something that definitely tells the story. There's something magical about it. Um, yeah, but
Thank
as
you.
you said, the question is if the clients see it and they feel the same we see those images, right? I think
Hmm.
that sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing about risk, right? Like it's quite scary. And if you have to stake something on that risk, like you have to
Yeah.
stake money on that risk, that's scary. It feels like a big gamble because you're like, my images aren't cheap. It's not cheap to work with me. And like you've gone through that process, right? So here's some money on the line for this.
Mm,
And like I can totally understand why someone might back away from the risky and go for the sort of what they assume to be tried and true. Now, if you look at the headshot market, especially for actors in London, it's kind of dominated by a small handful of photographers. I'm not going to
mhm,
name any names, but if anyone who's in London and knows the headshot world, then they kind of know the sort of small handful of people that are making the most or doing the most work. And there is one particular company, not person, but company,
mhm,
who works in London, and they've taken photographs of lots and lots and lots of people, and they've got relatively low prices, and they stack people up. They maybe
mhm,
have 4 or 5 shoots per day, and I think they've got multiple photographers, so they maybe have numbers and numbers and numbers, and all of these photos on their portfolio and stuff like that have got a taste of who they are. They've got a
yeah,
taste of the style of the photography company, and you kind of know that it's this brand that's taken the photographs. So my feeling is that if they've been so dominant for the last like 3 years in the industry, they're going to kind of be shooting themselves in the foot, and they're going to kind of be shooting the actors they're working with in the foot, because the actors will all kind of start to look the same. And I've started to hear it from agents. I've started to hear it from other people. It's like they've gone to these photographers and they've had those photographs taken,
mhm,
but because everyone's had very very similar looking photographs, they've played it safe. They've not
mhm.
put too much money behind it because it's good value. Good value
Good
for money
value.
is
Yeah.
good.
Mhm,
I mean, I would question whether good value is the right phrase, but let's just say good value, inexpensive, let's say. Okay. And they are photographs that people have been cast with. I was like, but yeah, but now of 300 photographs, 150 of them are all taken by the same photographers, and they all kind of look the same.
mhm,
So is it good value for money, or by playing it safe have you shot yourself in the foot because you're not differentiated enough from those 150 people? And I kind of tend to think it's the second one. I've run a business for the last 5 years.
mhm,
I've done it, and I've done it in a way to try and differentiate myself from other people in multiple ways. And I
mhm.
teach. I also do mentorships for other photographers, and in that we talk about differentiation, because it, you know, every market is a saturated market, but photography is a saturated market, so we
Mhm.
have to kind of differentiate ourselves. Now, how do you do that? You can do that in your
Yeah.
imagery. You can do that in the way you talk about yourself. You can do that in your kind of pricing models. You can do that in the various different ways that you engage with the sort of clients, your brand, as it were.
Yeah.
And so, with my mentees, my photography mentees, that's a thing that we really, really work on, like starting from the perspective of your values that make you different from other people,
Mhm.
and trying to understand how you create a business around those kind of really, really core values. And I think actors should do the same, business owners should do the same, people who are,
100%. Yeah.
all that, they should start from that perspective of being like, who are you and what makes you different from other, why am I going to
Mhm.
hire you rather than, Dave or Jeff or Jane or Mary?
Yeah. But
Sorry,
don't you think, because you brought quite an interesting point, and I want to kind of like highlight this even more, because from one hand, every photographer wants to be different, right? Like they want to be unique. They want to like, oh, I want to create something which stands out, something which kind of separates you from everybody else.
hmm
But then we have the other side of the story where, like you want to be trendy. You want to do like everybody else, right? Like you want to do those shots because they're popular. And I think that's what is like, as you said, we sometimes shooting ourselves in the foot. And I don't want to also say specific names, but we probably know what we're talking about. There's some headshot photographers who leading in that industry, and then they basically tell you like, you either shooting my way or you're not part of this group, right? You know what I
hmm
mean?
Yeah, I do. I
um
know very well. Yeah.
yeah, so that's something where it's interesting because like it seems like they have this recipe for good headshot,
Mm-hmm.
but you just shooting like everybody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Hmm.
implementing some elements which separates you, sometimes it feels risky, right?
Hmm.
Like we
Hmm.
talk about it as well. But at
Yeah.
the same time, we just scared, like, okay, if I'm doing this because everybody else is doing and it seems like they're successful, I'm going to be successful. But the more we put into the pile, right, like you're just creating more competition, right? You're just
Hmm.
creating more. So let's kind of dive a little bit deeper into this, and
Yeah.
so let's talk a little bit and switch the gears just a tiny bit. Let's talk about, because I think that's a great moment to jump into this. Let's talk about business and marketing.
Sure.
What's your strategy when it comes to market yourself, to do the business,
Hmm.
and also I want to kind of look at it from the perspective of the kind of like the time we live in right now, because marketing is changing. We're being beat up with advertising, with commercials, like everyone, I'm sure, getting sick of it. And then
Yep.
whatever we even see advertising these days, like it's funny, I was like, um had this kind of moment a few weeks ago where I have this like iTunes radio station, and they
Mm.
just keep popping those advertisements right
Yeah.
there. And then you have the best song, you're listening to it, you have this like moment of joy, and this commercial pop in, and just like
Yeah.
completely out of the blue, nothing related to the song. And I'm like, I hate this company so much now
Hmm.
because it's like interrupting my moments.
Yeah.
And they just doing disservice to themselves, running those commercials and the most inappropriate moments in our
Hmm.
lives. And then we
Yeah.
instead engaging us with this company, we just hate them, right? Like, I don't
Mm.
know, this is at least my experience.
Mine too.
uh, yeah.
Yeah.
So my question to you is how you advertise or how you market yourself in a way that it's not just like, how can I explain it? It's not invasive. It's not
Hmm.
something that we, instead attracting clients to ourselves, we're just pushing them away. And
Yeah.
what is your method
Yeah.
to kind of bring your clients to the studio?
Yeah. I totally agree with you about this kind of idea that, everything is now advertising. I mean, you just have to
Mhm.
scroll on Instagram. It used to be like you'd have one advert every 5 or 6 posts. It's like every other post, or, sometimes you get two
Yeah.
sponsored posts next to each other.
Yeah. And I
And
think
it's
it's
just,
becoming so ridiculous that, like even going back to the radio station
mm,
advertisement, they don't put one ad. Like, you listen to the music and then you have three, four, five ads,
hmm,
running for 30 seconds. So by the
yeah,
time it's over, whatever you were listening to, it's done, right?
yeah, yeah,
And it's just becoming that, as you said, we're living in this advertising world where it's just becoming like there's advertisement, and then sometimes you have those little gaps where you can really enjoy the content,
hmm,
um rather than
yeah,
as we used to have, that the advertising was just a little addition here and there, just
hmm,
so we can kind of get this attention. But now it's just completely opposite, and it's just becoming just frustrating, I think, for so many
yeah,
people.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it's the enshittification of our social media platforms, and the
Mhm.
enshittification of everything, right? So, um, as a devout anti-capitalist,
Mhm.
I'm not interested in participating, in that process. And so, yeah, like I have run ads before, and of course, at times I might need to run ads because I might need to kind of say, look, I mean, I've not got a huge number of followers on Instagram, 10,000, almost, yeah, 10,000 followers on Instagram, which is great, but it's like,
Yeah.
what percentage of those people actually see what I post? Probably, I think maybe 2,000,
Yeah.
3,000
Those
maximum.
numbers means nothing these days. Yeah, no. Like
Yeah,
I,
and
I I think numbers on social media, they used to means a lot. And then,
mm,
like even from my experience,
yeah,
just to kind of give you idea, like how this whole thing shifted. And
yeah,
then again, like nothing to do with work and whatever, but I remember days where I could get like 5 6 thousand likes on image. Now if I
yeah,
get like 100, that's
yeah,
and as you said, like when I see the stats, they don't show your work to people, right? Like it's
no,
it's just really, or there's so much out there that there's like no chance you can really highlighted your work.
yeah,
Not to mention also what I found, what is also really fascinating, and it does also drives me absolutely crazy, is, and then that's something where I think a lot of people is frustrated. That, and again, like I know those platforms pushing content which people pay attention to, like I get it, but we reach the kind of level where the most ridiculous stuff gets most attention, and the
Hmm.
things which I think bringing value to people's lives, to your work, to everything, is completely kind of pushed aside.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
then we have to dig really deep to find those interesting things through all
Hmm.
this garbage, which is more and more and more and more.
Yeah,
And it's, yeah, but sorry, I
yeah.
was just like,
No, no, it's totally fine. I think that because of the way that these various platforms have, the way that they're attempting to make money, essentially,
mhm,
and
yeah,
it's almost that since various political changes, since various kind of cultural and social changes of the last 10 years have happened, there has been a greater sense that they can just unleash this kind of
mhm,
hyper capitalism on us. That there's almost no shame now. It's like, we used to have an
yeah,
environment in which, okay, there were adverts, but we were like, they were kind of just, there. And there wasn't
mhm,
all
yeah,
this obviously AI slop all the time. And we just kind of, we use social media as a kind of a tool to connect with other people. And that's still the way that people are trying to use it and trying to engage with other people. And it's great. And it's nice. I have got, we've been in contact because of it. I've got other contacts
yeah,
because of Instagram and so forth. Got other friends because of it, which is great. And you can see their work, you can see what they're up to and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, if the experience of being in those platforms is fundamentally frustrating, is
mhm,
that the mindset that you want people to be experiencing your work in?
yeah,
If they're basically on this app and they're kind of, it's doom scrolling, they know that they're doom scrolling, they know that they're in this kind of mindset, and it's like, oh, is it, do I have to do this? Oh my God, it's another advert. And then they see your work, maybe it'll help. And
yeah,
yeah, I've got followers from running ads, I've got followers from boosting posts and stuff like this. But actually, my approach is very much not. I know that I have to post content. Like, content is helpful because it tells
yeah,
Google and AI that I'm, interesting as a photographer, right? So content is
mhm,
part of the strategy, which is why I've done the podcast. But the podcast lives on YouTube, it lives on Apple Podcasts, it lives on Spotify. Now, as much as we
mhm,
might sort of disagree with some of the things that are happening on those platforms, especially things like, Spotify's inability to pay their artists and so forth, awful platforms, they are not platforms that operate in the same way as Instagram, and not that anybody really uses Facebook anymore, but those kinds of platforms, TikTok, etc. So you know they have a life that's a little bit more that has a bit more longevity.
mhm,
So I tend to think that that's a good place for the content that's that's video, and then my Instagram is just kind of, I'll just keep it running. Like, I'll just keep the
yeah,
posts flowing, and I'll post every couple of days, and engage with my audience. And yes, that is where I'm going to be doing like some reels and stuff coming up, and more education stuff and those sorts of things. But the other thing is that, like, my big play this last 2 years, the work that I've done has been basically to get to number one on Google.
mhm,
So I knew that I needed to work hard on my SEO, and that's various different ways of doing that.
mhm,
But, like, in the middle of 2024, yeah, I got to number one on Google. Like, it wasn't just like, I went from like page 6, page 4, sometimes for my
mhm,
search terms, to being not just not just in the first page, but on like number one mostly.
mhm,
And, like, there's other photographers that I swap places with every now and again, and it kind of, little backwards and forwards and so on and so forth. And it's a nice little game. Um, but like, it's about building a brand, because you can be in that place, but you can be number one. You can stuff your website full of keywords and be number one. But if your work is like, or like, your the way you talk about yourself is, people aren't going to want to work with you, right? So
yeah,
you know it's not just about the kind of what's it, the ego boost of being number one. it's
mhm,
the it's the it's like what you do when you get people to your website. So
yeah,
you know, I think that it's really important for me that I've approached this from the perspective of, like, I don't want to do like really hard direct marketing to people. Like, I don't want to do this kind of hardcore, like, let's get advertised all the time. It's
yeah,
necessary sometimes because I need people to see what I'm putting out there sometimes, because I still do run a business. But the approach that I've taken is, I want to build a brand, and I think that I want people to kind of come to me specifically because they want to come to me. And that's kind of the thing,
Mhm.
doing something like this, like being on a podcast and running my own podcast, you know, having those kinds of pieces of output that go out into the world that people want to engage with and do engage with. And, especially long form content, I think, because it's the
Mhm.
possibility to engage in more depth in a particular idea. And that for me is much more interesting than, dancing in front of a camera for the sake of it or whatever, like, I don't need hundreds of thousands of followers on a platform, on a social media platform that I hate being on. you
Yeah.
know like, I don't need those kinds of things to run a successful business. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't. So, I don't need to play an influencer game. I need to play a game where I'm like, right, I want people to be really interested in the things that I'm
Very
saying and
good.
the way that I'm and what I'm doing. So, you know it's it's much better for me to kind of build the brand and build the kind of idea of who I am or what it means to work with me. And that's
Mhm.
the attempt I've taken. That's the approach that I've taken. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's something. I think we have to stick to it, right? Because I think as soon as we kind of, I don't know, this is maybe my opinion, but
Hmm.
I'm struggling with this a lot. That like how I can find a balance to, as you said, just showing people who you are, what you do, how
Mm.
important that is, and showing through your work, rather than as you said, dancing around and then doing those silly videos just to get
Hmm.
attention, and hopefully someone will catch on what you're doing, right?
Hmm.
But as you said, like those social media platforms, they have own agenda, and we kind of trying to push it through somehow, which sometimes is contradicting to what we believe in, right? Like,
Hmm.
I don't want to do some stupid, silly stuff, and but that's the reality. I think we need to somehow navigate through it. So that leads me to the next topic I just want to touch is
Yeah.
the AI. We're
Sure.
living in kind of times where AI is definitely disrupting, like everything, right? And
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
everyone try to figure it out, how to deal with this, how to take advantage of it, how to don't get killed by it as well.
Hmm.
And also what is fascinating for me, and I don't know if you agree with me, but we have those kind of two sides of the story, like no, not maybe not two sides of the story, but there's two spectrums. People who kind of believe in it, they kind of looking hopeful that there's going to kind of bring some value to it, and there's
Hmm.
people completely against it. And then I, as soon as you put something out there on social media when it comes to AI, and then I get this like people who like, oh my god, that's fantastic, and people who want to just crucify you right right on the spot.
Hmm.
So what is your opinion, like how you look at this whole new technology, how it's interrupting our industry, obviously interrupting everything in our
Hmm.
lives, right?
Hmm.
Because whoever you talk to, the AI always kind of comes in,
Hmm.
and there's different opinions. So how you look at it, and what's your approach to it? Do you use AI? Are you kind of playing with it a little bit? And what's, I know maybe that's kind of not the correct question, but like, what's your prediction? Like, which direction we're going with this new
Hmm.
technology?
Yeah, I mean, I want to underwrite my answer to this
Okay.
with the acknowledgement that AI is a massive economic and environmental threat,
Yes.
and there is no route around that at the moment. Like,
Mhm.
there may be in the future, there may be some way to do it in a clean energy perspective with with less water usage,
Yeah.
but at the moment it's not.
Agree.
It is deeply detrimental to our environment. Now, it also harbors the kind of promise of or the promise that Silicon Valley wants to make us believe. It harbors the promise of being um, a replacement for humanity.
Mhm.
And I think that what that means is that you get that position where you have the capacity to produce economic growth without labor, without the attachment to human labor, right? So you
Mhm.
can produce economic growth and product that can be sold and economic activity without human labor. Now, you might argue that the financialization and the latter part of the 20th century, and the sort of massive growth of the economy and derivatives market and so forth, is that process, which it's true. That is delinking of the capacity to make money from labor. But AI basically says, well, we can even replace workers with this. You don't have to have a kind of underlying sort of economy with people in it at all. uh and the kind of, I suppose what happens with all technologies is that there is a kind of shortening, or a kind of a tightening of economic benefit for workers. So, if you look at the way in which the sort of computer revolution, or the sort of IT revolution, sort of meant that we lost a lot of like drafts people, let's say, people who would do like large sketches of buildings, or or write out by hand or type out. It was death to the typist pool and those sorts of things, right? Like, it's that kind of process, and all kind of all kind of the history of all technology is a similar process. On the one hand, technology is an attempt to kind of think beyond like your own limitations as a human. Like, okay, so I can get to the moon. I could never get to the moon before, so technology is a kind of, as a Promethean kind of exploratory kind of leap into the unknown, into the void, and into the kind of the sort of beyond the human, which for some people is incredible. That's amazing, right?
Mhm.
But that always means that there is going to be some form of there's a cost to that. Now, what that cost looks like is different depending on the technology. What we're probably facing, if AI is as successful as Sam Altman wants it to be, or other players in this game want it to be, we're probably looking at a major economic collapse, because there's going to be
Mhm.
massive human obsolescence if they get to that stage where they operate in a kind of completely unregulated fashion.
Mhm.
Now, I'm not sure whether it's ever going to get there. Now, there's an argument to say that the AI bubble is a massive bubble. Now, we know that the AI bubble is supporting the US economy, which read the world economy. We know that because essentially the US economy would not exist in the way that it does if AI didn't exist, right? So the US economy is basically underwritten by this massive growth in AI. But what's happening is that there's just no way to fill the sort of promised capacity of AI, because you'd need to create and produce billions and billions, billions of dollars worth of, maybe trillions of dollars worth of data centers, and you need to staff them, and you need to kind of grow them and pump water into them, and provide them with energy and so forth. And you need to then replace the chips every couple of years, and you need to kind of constantly be doing this. And the
Mhm.
massive upfront cost of this is so great that actually I think there's this kind of disconnect between the kind of promise of AI, the kind of economic
Mhm.
promise of AI, and its kind of capacity to be realized, which means that we're probably coming to this kind of sort of moment that's similar to the dot-com bubble bursting back in the 2000, early 2000s.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
there will be this kind of massive burst. Does not mean that AI is not going to be part of people's lives. And I think what happens is that people kind of, they kind of have this massive, great big sort of promise of this thing that's going to take over, sort of change lives, change the world. And then it doesn't realize its promise. And then what happens is we settle into using it in a way that's a tool. Now, if you look at the kind of Coke advert, the Coca-Cola Christmas advert, like, it has been roasted, and rightly so, because it's just
Yeah.
terrible, and it's cost $70,000 to get better, like, to fix, right? And it's like, you just hired some people to fix the problems that AI have created. Now, of course, AI could improve, but are you ever going to get past that issue of like, well, you have to write a prompt for AI to interpret and then come up with something like this. Just is that kind of interpretive process actually is really difficult for AI to do successfully, because you'll just be sitting there go, no, what I really meant was this. What I really meant was this. What I really meant was this. I don't know about you, but like, I use ChatGPT sometimes,
Mhm.
and it's wrong. Like, it's just
Oh yeah.
fundamentally wrong. Like, so often, like, I've not taken legal advice from ChatGPT. I'm not an idiot, but I've
Mhm.
thought, I've pushed things to ChatGPT. It's like here, let's experiment with this. Let's try this out. And it's just like given me stuff that I'm like, I'd speak to like I'd then speak to a lawyer and be like, "Oh, I've got this idea." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 that's
Yeah.
just wrong."
You know, it's interesting. I had this similar. Sorry for interrupting. I had this
Mm,
similar
it's fine.
conversation with one of the clients of mine, who's also he's running like a injury firm, law firm,
Yeah, yeah,
and he says people coming and they like think they're experts, right? They have, oh,
yeah,
I run this through chat gpt, and like it seems like they have all these answers. He's like, man, 90% what you're telling me is wrong. It's completely hallucination, and whenever the AI didn't have answers, just made stuff up with
yeah.
no sense whatsoever. I tried to, what was speaking of that, I'm just gonna just briefly say one more thing.
Hmm.
I actually start asking ChatGPT about the stuff what we do, because you
Mm,
can create the kind of like the own
mm.
GPT for stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
And when it comes to headshot photography, the same thing. 90% stuff what we're saying was completely flat wrong, right?
Hmm.
And so
Hmm.
I agree with you. There's
Yeah.
certain things which like could be right or is right, but if you don't understand the topic deeply, like it sounds like it's correct, but
Hmm.
when
Hmm.
you talk to experts, all of a sudden, none of this make any sense, right?
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
fascinating that we feeding all these informations, which sounds good and sounds right, but it's not necessarily the right way to kind of
yeah.
getting those information from
Absolutely, absolutely.
ChatGPT.
Often people ask me, the kind of the initial question that people ask me when we come to this kind of idea about ChatGPT is like, what's not ChatGPT, will AI take your job? And I always say to them, no, AI is not taking my job. Like, it's not taking my job,
Mm-hmm.
because my job is not built on the capability to produce a good image of your face. Like, that's not the major part of my job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can take a couple of like snapshots of your face and plug it into this thing and then create a nice photograph of a nice sort of in inverted commas photograph of your
Yeah.
face, and it looks really close. It's kind of uncannily close to who
Yeah.
you are, but it won't take my job, because my job isn't that. My job's not just taking a photograph of your face. Everything we've spoken about already, like, that's the point, right? My
Yeah.
job's much different to that. What AI threatens is to take all the jobs of all the people that might work with me.
Yeah.
So all the paralegals, all of the people whose jobs are essentially administrative or filing based, or sort of processing large pieces of information. Now we know that, like, there is hallucinations. We know that they fundamentally gets things wrong, but it can be relied upon, or is sometimes being relied upon for some things. But the problem is, if we allow AI to take all of those jobs, and whether that's the right thing to do in a kind of moral sense, which I don't think it is, there's probably going to be massive job losses across various different industries, which means a massive slowing of the economy, which means that people buy less, which means that people don't have the money to spend on nice headshots, and therefore potentially I lose clients because of that. So I think
Mm.
what people have got to be really keen on is the idea that economies are connected things, right?
Mhm.
The economy that we live on is all part of the same thing. It's a big machine, right?
Yeah.
Like, if you get £1,000, you go and spend that £1,000 on Christmas presents for your friends and family, and that puts money back into the pockets of the people that you spend that
Yeah.
£1,000 in. And if you spend that £1,000 like with all of the local community shops around you, then
Everyone is growing. Yeah.
everyone's growing. If that £1,000 goes to Jeff Bezos, none of that's going, right. If that thousand
Yeah.
pounds if you know and if you don't have that £1,000 to spend, this is the dynamism of money, right? You don't have the £1,000 to spend, you don't have the capacity to, so whenever we, like, right, in the UK we've had like just decades of this thing called austerity, right, which is essentially like trying to cut down on the debt, on the national debt. It's a terrible, terrible way of doing it, because, like, if you try and cut your way out of a debt crisis, you're going to basically impoverish your society, and then there's going to be less money going into the exchequer, because you don't have the capacity to tax people as much as you used to, right? Like, we all know this, but like for the last over a decade, we've been running on a kind of austerity, then austerity light, and then kind of various versions of austerity,
Yeah.
because politicians have got have got a kind of a lack of imagination when it comes to this.
Mm.
And it's the same thing, because essentially what you're saying is that if a large portion of a workforce in any economy can be taken over by something else, that costs people very little, all of the profits flood to the owners of the model, or the owners of the company, and then the workers don't get any money, which just means that there's a slower economy. So that's the thing I'm scared of. I'm not scared of, like, me losing out on clients because ChatGPT or AI has literally taken the client. It's that the economy in general slows, and the economy is kind of what we all rely upon as business owners to be growing. I mean, look, we don't have to have necessarily growth. Like, this is a completely another conversation about
Yeah,
growth.
yeah,
Like, infinite growth on a limited planet, maybe not possible, or isn't possible necessarily, but we do have to have that kind of conversation about what a kind of healthy economy looks like, and where the money in the healthy economy goes to. So that's the thing. Like, ChatGPT, AI, etc., doesn't care about the communities that it's being part of, so it won't kind of, it doesn't
yeah,
participate in those communities. And look, fuck it, I love people. Like, people are great, right? Like, people are our hope. People are the and we really need to just invest in people, and that
yeah,
means that being part of an economy and a community is the most important thing that we can
yeah,
do. And
yeah,
until we get full socialism, of course.
yeah. Well, I think we're gonna have to figure this out, right? Because
Yeah.
like I think I just hope we're not gonna reach the point where there's no return, or there's the things get so deep that we won't be able to control it. And as you said, like, we just enrich people who are already rich, right? They don't need more. And the money should go back to this, I would say, middle class and people who actually run this economy, right, and keep it going.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's interesting. But going back to the stuff what we do, I 100% agree with you. I have this actually interesting conversation too with one of the clients recently, and they actually came for a headshot session, and they started questioning, like, we reaching the point where everyone going to be able to take few selfies and create these amazing headshots, for AI. And I said to that person, I'm like, you know what? Answer me that question. Would you like to see your kids' pictures created by AI, or would you rather have them, like, done by photographer? And like, just shook them. Like, it is like, yeah, yeah, you're right. I never thought
Hmm.
about it that way.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
like, you see, like, it's just kind of depends how you look at it, right? Depends on the perspective. And
yeah,
just because you can create something artificially doesn't mean you're just stripping from the value, from meaning, from really the human connection.
hmm,
And that's what photography is all about, right? It's
yeah,
not just the picture itself, it's how it's
yeah,
created, it's about
yeah,
experience and all this stuff, right? So
yeah.
yeah.
Just to add to that, one of the places that AI may threaten the headshot photographer is in the kind of corporate team photography world. So let's say you run a firm that has got 100 people in it. Rather than hiring a headshot photographer that you might have to pay a couple of thousand, a few £1,000s for, I would charge
Mhm.
quite a lot for 100 people. Rather than paying for them, their temptation might be to go to AI. And I've actually played this scenario through in my mind, and it's actually, this is how I think it would go.
Mhm.
So let's say you work for this large firm. You are you're the PR person, marketing team, or whatever. You employ somebody to do the AI headshots of people.
Mhm.
Now, you have to speak to 100 people and ask them to upload 5 to 7 images of their face in a
Mhm.
well-lit environment, recent photographs, to a portal. Now, these are people that are busy in their work, and they have to find or take 5 to 7 photographs of themselves and then upload them to this portal. How long do you think it's going to take you to chase those 100 people? I mean, it's going to be a long process to chase those 100 people. I know, because people do not like doing something outside of their work. And when you start asking them to choose photographs themselves, it takes forever. So you don't do that. So that person's going to be employed probably for around about 6 months to do specifically this thing: chase people, upload it to the portal, pump out that photograph, upload it to the website. Now, number one, is everybody in that team going to be okay with images of themselves being put into the AI world, and all the kind of security issues that might entail? Possibly not. If you work in the financial sector, maybe you are a name in the financial sector and you don't want your face being kind of owned by AI, right? So
Mhm.
there's number one. We need to start thinking about our safety and our safety online, our security and stuff. Number two, are they going to be the best photographs? No. They're going to be simulacra of people's faces, and most people are going to kind of be able to tell. So if you're a firm that relies on trust, and what you've done is you've simulated your staff headshots, and you are
Shooting
potentially
yourself in the foot.
you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot. And really, at the end of the day, you've employed that person probably for a few, like at least a couple of weeks. How much are you spending on that person? It's going to be a few £1,000s to employ that one person to go around and chase all those people and then upload them to the website.
Mhm.
So by that point, you've not saved any money either.
Yeah.
So you might as well just set up a headshot photographer in one of your offices for a couple of days with an assistant and maybe a hair and makeup person to come in and take some good photographs, like well lit and properly, done, and that are not going to be uploaded to some AI model.
Yeah.
So realistically, the one thing that I think that it could have replaced us with is actually one of the most difficult things for it to replace because it's just too much fucking work.
Yeah.
So that's
But
my
you know what?
idea.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into this because I
Yeah.
actually work for a little bit, not like work, but I was approached by a company, which is companies from states, but they actually moved to Poland,
Hmm.
and they actually create this platform. I'm not going to mention the name just for the sake of safety,
Hmm.
where you like literally that's their whole business. You upload between 5 to 10 selfies, and it's creating your professional headshots.
Hmm.
So they gave me the full access to it, where I could just upload my images, my clients' images.
Hmm.
So they were running through so many issues where people like uploading images of somebody else. So the
Hmm.
safety was just kind of like they got really like people were going after them because they were like, you know what, why are you allowing uploading images which not yours, and you're
Hmm.
creating
Hmm.
images of somebody else.
Hmm.
But the interesting thing was when I upload my images there, just kind of see what I'm gonna get. Um, and I can tell you those images were so off that like my body was completely different, the proportions, like you
Hmm.
could like as a photographer you see this stuff
Hmm.
like right away. Not to mention, there was completely lack of understanding the face expressions.
Hmm.
Every image kind of looked the same. So
Hmm.
what the game they were playing, that they were just playing, you getting tons of shots, and they're saying like, okay, maybe out of those 200 images, maybe there's one or two which you can, where AI kind of nail it and kind of get
Hmm.
close enough, so what you might like. But going back to your point, it wasn't cheap. It's about $100, I think, for like the basic
Hmm.
level of getting, I don't know, 20, 30 images. So
Hmm.
when you had let's say you have 100 clients, you multiply this
Yeah.
by, all these people, which I'm guessing none of these people would be happy with those shots.
Hmm. Yeah.
It's way more costly that hiring a photographer and then doing this the proper way, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people, like, it sounds kind of like ideal, and that's what they approach is like, oh, you don't have to go to photographer, you're saving a
Hmm.
lot of money. There's all this kind of like arguments which seems kind of like it's okay,
Hmm.
but the ethical kind of side of it is completely shattered.
Yeah.
Those images are pretty bad, I think, at that stage. And I talked to them because they actually asked me to help their engineers to train that AI
Hmm.
model to get those shots. And they were only focusing on lighting, right? Like, lighting and all this stuff.
Hmm.
But the AI had completely no understanding of the face expression, the micro face expressions, the body language. Like everything was just completely off, right? So, and I think
Hmm.
we were really far from getting to the point that AI can really understand the body language, the microphase expressions, the human
Yeah.
connection.
Yeah.
It's a long way to go. So people don't
Yeah.
realize that. But, I think for me, the way I look at it is just the ethical
Hmm.
perspective, which is completely put to the side. And, as you said, like, if you have I don't know, I'm sure you've heard about this story recently that McDonald's did this like AI commercial.
I haven't
Did you
seen
hear
it.
that? Okay, so
No.
what happened was that's
Tell me.
interesting. So McDonald's create this ad for Christmas for the
Hmm.
products, whatever, which is whatever shitty company, anyways. But they did this AI full ad not using any people, just everything is basically AI generated.
Mhm.
And I think after 3 or 4 days, they got such a backlash that people started like really going after, like, such a
Yeah.
company, and you guys cannot use normal people, and then they have to
Yeah.
take it down. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was pretty much, like,
Amazing.
disservice them so much that I think just harmed them more than they expecting. But again, they were like, oh, it was probably cheaper hiring few kind of experts when it comes to
Yeah.
prompting, and just this completely dismantle all this, like, the way they used to do that stuff, and just
Yeah.
taking, I think what was the biggest issue, which was fascinating for me, that they took away the human element from it, right? That it
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
completely generated, nothing was real, which was great commercial, by the way, but like, when you think about, okay, none of this is real, what kind of value we have there, right? And I think the
Yeah.
same applies to headshot photography. If your
Yeah.
company, I don't know, makes millions or billions of dollars, and you cannot put real pictures of people because you're just creating them artificially, like, how
Yeah.
we can trust you with your product or your service, whatever, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm really glad it's getting the backlash that it deserves because it's
Oh yeah.
awful. And I've not seen the McDonald's one. I've seen the Coke one. I've not seen the McDonald's one. But I think something that came up for me there is that the what's the best way to put this? If a company is like if if the company is like really trying to do this because they're doing it from a money saving perspective and they are damaging their brand, then fundamentally they're making bad economic choices, right?
Yes.
They're making bad choices for their brand, because everyone's so sick of it. They're so sick of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're sick of it. But why are we sick of it? The reason we're sick of it is because you have people like, um, Peter Thiel and Sam Altman and all the kind of like the Palantir people and all of the kind of the tech bros coming on the internet and basically saying we want to make humans obsolete. Like,
Mm.
kind of like secretly sort of chuckling,
Yeah.
sort of they're like they're villains, they're villainous people, right?
Yeah.
If they'd have said, okay, there are some really specific problems that AI can solve. So, medical diagnosis. If we can use a large language model like a ChatGPT type thing to solve medical problems because it can bring together all of the kind of knowledge of the medical
Mhm.
community and solve medical problems, and we're really going to specify with that, would we have the same kind of reaction? No. But the problem
No.
is that if you're starting from the perspective of like we want AI to be the whole world and take over everything, if it says, okay, what AI can really help you with is being this little tool in your pockets to help you with, sort of some idea generation. Fine, we all use it for sort of idea generation because it's a tool, right? But it's the attitude of these people that are doing this. It's
Mhm.
the kind of neo-feudal, we want to be the kind of the masters of the universe kind of approach where all of you kind of plebs are left out in the cold.
Yeah.
It's like, no wonder we're angry, like,
Yeah.
because we're seeing the slop that's taking over, rotting our brains, that's taking money out of our pocket, that's putting money into those people's pockets, that's destroying the planet, that's not actually delivering on the promises that it has. And it could be used in a way that is amazing. Like, you can imagine, I think AI can detect on a brain scan like a
Mhm.
tumor months before a doctor can. Now that could be a really, really interesting use of it, and I'm sure it is being used in those circumstances. But is it? Does it have to also do the McDonald's ad and take over actors' jobs and filmmakers' jobs and scriptwriters' jobs and all of these kinds of things? No, it doesn't. It doesn't have to do
No.
that, and that's the problem. And I
No.
think that it's what'll probably happen is that it will, but hopefully the bubble will burst, and then it will be more effectively and more helpfully put into these kinds of more local uses of it. But the biggest problem is the biggest reason why this isn't happening is because essentially it's going to be used for military purposes. Like,
And that's actually my thought, right on the spot. When you said
yeah,
that, like, I've been thinking about it, like, like, if we can use, like, well, if we can use it AI for the right reasons, can do miracles for humanity, for
Mhm.
us, for everything.
Yeah.
But I think, as you said, like we've been started using this completely the wrong way, um and then taking advantage of things which, like, yeah, it's just completely, well, like I yeah, I agree with you. If this is gonna go to military to the point where, like it's gonna just completely shatter our world, that's yeah, well, it's gonna end pretty soon and in a very horrific way, I think.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well,
Okay. You know what? We're supposed to talk for an hour. It's hour and
yes.
a half. Why don't we take a rain check and we're gonna make this part one, and then we're gonna come
We'll
back
come
to the
back and
conversation.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
sounds
would love
great.
to talk to you more. I think,
Mm,
that was really interesting chat, and
absolutely.
we scratched the surface,
Scratch the
based
surface. Exactly.
what
There's
I
always
feel.
more. There's always more to be
More.
talked about.
So,
Yeah, absolutely.
why don't we end here and then,
Mhm.
plan it, another chat within the next few months.
That sounds great. Yeah, of
And
course. Yeah, I'm also going to be releasing season 2 of my podcast, so
absolutely
I'm sure I can get you on to come and be a guest on my podcast as well.
would
So
love to.
yeah, yeah,
Anytime,
yeah.
anytime.
That's
And you know
fantastic.
what? Also, yeah, let's keep in touch. Like the way I like to work with, people who are part of my podcast and people who
Mm,
are like, kind of like becoming friends. Like I love to support
yeah,
everybody, because we're in the same boat, and I think we need
exactly.
to somehow help each other in this crazy times.
Yes,
So, having
absolutely.
people on board, that's fascinating. And again, thank you so much for accepting the invitation. That
Of
was
course. My
amazing
pleasure.
conversation. I
My
love every
pleasure.
minute of it, and
Thank
I
you.
think we could talk for another few
Absolutely.
hours.
I think, but just before we wrap up, I
Yes,
just want to
yeah,
make sure that I shout out a couple of people
yes,
who've been incredibly supportive on my journey. And I didn't get the opportunity to talk about Headshots Matter, which is a kind of headshot group that really celebrates sort of
yeah.
different styles of headshot production. And it's run by a guy based in Ottawa called Dwayne Brown, who's also a headshot photographer. He
Mhm.
started this about, I think, 7 years ago thereabouts,
Yeah,
and it's growing and growing and growing and growing. So if there's any of your listeners that are really interested in joining a group of like really lovely, amazing, dynamic headshot photographers, find Headshots Matter on Instagram or on the internet
absolutely.
and speak to Dwayne. So very, very, very
I
helpful.
have couple ideas based on what you said. One, I'll first of all, I'll plug in everybody to this podcast, to all this
Of
descriptions, whatever
course.
this is going to go. And another thing, what I would love to do, and this is just kind of hit me right now, why don't we maybe kind of create this group? Maybe not create a group, but maybe we can create a podcast where we can have not two people, but we can have three,
Mm,
four, and
yeah,
have
yeah,
some kind of discussion about, headset photography and the
yeah.
industry and what it's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I know that Dwayne's always very happy to jump on these things, and I'm sure
Yeah,
there's lots of other people who'd be up for this. So
yeah,
yeah, yeah, I'm always, I mean, I love talking and I'm always happy to be part of these kind of conversations. So very, very happy to do this again.
yeah,
And it's been great. And I mean, one thing I would say is that like, you know, it's one hell of a journey, right? Like if some of your listeners are starting out in the headshot world, it's like an amazing, amazing journey. And like get people around you to sort of talk to and either mentor or to bounce ideas off. Like I've been really lucky to have a few people around me, and Dwayne's one of them, and there's other people around me as well, and have those kind of people there that are going to be, you know, sort of helping you grow and
yeah.
supporting you along the way. So having community is really helpful.
Yeah. And one thing what I want to add to this, which was my experience. So I came from a wedding photography kind of
Hmm.
like
Hmm.
background. That's how I kind of started.
Yeah.
And wedding photography at that time, it's been a while, but now probably times change a little bit, but was really cutthroat. Like nobody would help you ever. Like, if you have some
Okay.
issues, some problems, they would never like
Yeah.
give you any advice. And I remember I transitioned into headshot photography. And what was the biggest shock, that I could reach out to any headshot photographer with some questions, and they would ever always reply to me, say, hey, try this, try that. If this isn't working, maybe that's the issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I was blown away how headshot photographers were helping each other. And I think we can all see that. And,
Mm-hmm.
that this
Yeah.
headshot photography community is not only very strong, but also people helping each other, which is
Mm-hmm.
fascinating. And I think,
Yeah.
I haven't seen that in wedding photography. It was
Okay.
completely opposite. But when
Mm-hmm.
I entered that um, industry, and then when I start talking to headshot photographers, completely different approach, which is
Mm-hmm.
great. So if everyone is, as you said, everyone is starting, I can guarantee you will get the help. If you're gonna
Yeah.
get stuck, you're gonna get some
Yeah.
issues along the way. There will be
Exactly.
people who can always help you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more than happy to answer questions if people are interested. Just pop onto Instagram or shoot me a message, and I'm more than happy to point you in the right direction. So yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. Tom, thank you so much.
Raffle, my pleasure.
Wishing you Merry Christmas and
You
Happy New
too.
Year.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we'll definitely come back to the conversation, and we'll kind of finish this, and we'll talk a little bit about, maybe having some kind of panel, and, that would be kind of interesting.
Sounds like a good idea. Lovely.
Okay.
Happy
Okay.
Christmas.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.
Bye bye.